Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Paris and this is my Creative Corner. I come across an article with creepy things kids have said about their past lives, and I figured I would share it with you guys. You might want to make sure you're relaxed on the sofa, tucked up in bed, grab a drink, and we will jump right in. Kids say the darndest things, but what if the things they said weren't actually so silly? What if instead they were describing past lives? These kids describe their past lives with such detail that it's hard to shake off. Many cultures believe in the idea of reincarnation, whether it's a birthmark that shows the way you died in a past life, or a distant dreamlike memory you can't shake. Some people believe they've got real, concrete evidence to prove they've been reincarnated, while others just have creepy stories. That makes me wonder. The weirdest of all are the wildly creepy stories of children's past lives. The things kids remember from their past are things no child could have possibly known, from the story of grandparents' deaths to a foreign language from a country they'd never visited. Children who have been reincarnated often mention their past lives offhand, like it's completely normal and no big deal. Other children are haunted by their former traumatic deaths. These true stories from kids' past lives are undoubtedly unsettling, but do you believe them? The Veteran from BuzzFeed. Our oldest son is named after a Marine that was killed in action on my husband's last deployment. On a drive to my sister-in-law's house, we passed a military base where his namesake is buried. We had never visited his grave with our then 3-year-old. As we were driving right past the area where his grave is, our son tells us just matter-of-factly, "I'm buried over there." We stopped our conversation and asked him to repeat himself. "I'm buried over there in the ground, you know, from when I died when I was fighting bad guys with Daddy. Before I was your kid," he said, and then just went back to whatever 3-year-old game he was playing. We had never even visited that side of the city we were in. He had no clue that the graveyard was even there. A Scottish pub crawl from Redditor. When I was about 4 years old, we were driving through Scotland. I'd never been to Scotland in my life, and we stopped at this pub in a small village in the Cairngorms. I might pronounce that wrong. I got out of the car and said, "Oh, my favourite place," which my parents thought a bit weird. They sat down and got a drink, and my dad looked around and said, "Where are the toilets?" I apparently leapt up and took him by the hand straight to the toilets, which were actually tucked right away behind a fake wall type thing. Again, my parents were a bit unsettled, but just assumed I had seen them on the way in. Then it got weird. I was telling my mum about how much I used to love her coming here and sitting beside the fire. There actually wasn't a fire in the pub at all, so Mum laughed and asked me, "What fire?" I pointed to a wall and said that there used to be a fire over there. She shrugged it off. But then I carried on and went into more detail. I claimed I used to live out here and come in the pub nearly every day. I was friends with the owner, Fred. My mum went and spoke to one of the bar staff and asked if there was a man named Fred here, to which she replied, "Oh no, sorry miss. Fred died over 10 years ago now." How strange. The Farmer from BuzzFeed. When my son was 5, we were all eating lunch at a popular restaurant that has old farming equipment on the walls. As we were sitting at our table waiting for our plates to be delivered, my son casually pointed to a complicated piece of equipment and began to explain to me what it was and what it was specifically used for when harvesting. My husband and I stared at him in confusion, and I said, "Hunter, how do you know this?" His answer sent shivers down my spine and has caused me to rethink what may be possible with our journeys as souls. I'm not sure, I just know. That blade was sharp though. And then he shivered to himself as if remembering something horrible before lifting his peanut butter sandwich. Swimming with Fishes from Reader's Digest. When I was your age, I changed your diaper. That's just one of the incredibly creepy quotes Sam, an 18-month-old infant, said to his father, Ron. Sam believed he was his deceased grandfather and repeated things there was no way an infant could have possibly known. At 18 months old, Sam was speaking in full sentences and shared this chilling exchange with his parents about a sister he couldn't have known existed. Sam was asked if he had any siblings in his past life. He said he had a sister who turned into a fish. Who turned into a fish? His parents asked. Some bad guys. She died, he replied. While Sam didn't have any siblings, eerily enough, his grandfather did have a sister. Her body was found in the San Francisco Bay after being murdered 60 years prior. How did he know? Oh, that's really weird. They straight out. You just can't make things like that up when you're like they're kids. I just can't get past it. I definitely believe there's something out there. Okay, the next one. The Mother by His Headstone. Reddit user Pink Mercedes said her younger brother always used to talk about his past life, and the story never changed once. My little brother used to tell my mum and I that he died when he was 11 by being hit by a car. He said our mum was his mum before, and when he died she was crying at his headstone. He said this many times between when he could first talk until he was about 6 years old or so. So it wasn't a one-time thing. In the story he always was 11, always died by being hit by a car, and it was always our mum crying at his headstone. Now at 19 years old, her brother still remembers his death, sort of. He says he remembers telling us about it a lot, but only vaguely remembers his death, like as if it was a dream. A past life as a Chinese mailman. From Redditor. Apparently, when I was just old enough to talk in sentences, I'd walk around the house and backyard with a large cloth bag that I found in my mum's closet. Mum asked me one day why I always wore the bag slung over my shoulder. I told her it was for delivering messages like I did in China. This became a reoccurring theme, and I'd often mention little details about my past life in China where my parents asked if I had a Chinese name. I'd say, you can just call me Bob. How weird. The elephant in the room. My younger brother, 11 years difference, told me and my parents about his past life when he was very young, 4 or 5. He would describe the streets of India he lived in with great detail and how he was crushed by an elephant. He would cry for a long period of time about how there was so much blood and how he was always being cold at the end of these memories. It sounds ridiculous, but he shared this story about how he died so clearly without ever being exposed to death or bleeding more than just a few scrapes that it makes me question a lot. The Fire from BuzzFeed. It first happened when my daughter was almost 4 years old. She was playing on the floor and I was on the couch. She said, "Mama, I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay," or something like that in a response. She said, "Before I was me and before you were my mama, I burned." I asked her what she meant. She said, "My old mama tried to get me out, but the door was stuck. My skin looked weird." Talk about chills running down your spine. Still gives me goosebumps. An ominous birthmark. In some religions, a birthmark is said to show how you've died in your past life, especially if that death was traumatic. One Redditor connected the dots between their unique birthmark and ominous childhood behaviour. They said, "When I was a kid, I used to go around saying I was shot and killed by a poison arrow that grazed my arm. I don't remember saying this, but according to my parents, I said it every day, often crying about it and how I couldn't save my son, or something like that. I'm still sceptical about it, but I have a birthmark in the shape of a large line on my upper right arm." Kind of a cool coincidence. To grandmother's house we go. A Redditor recounted a chilling childhood story from when they were around 2 years old. Could this have been a flash of their past life? They said. Apparently, we were driving in the car and I was chattering away like kids do. We were at a stoplight and all of a sudden I stopped talking, squinted and looked out the window in a shaky voice. I said, "Why don't they ever come visit me?" My mother said it didn't sound like my voice, or a kid's for that matter. She asked, "Who doesn't visit?" "My grandkids. They never visit anymore." Apparently, it freaked my mum out. She tried to ask me later that night and a few times after what I was talking about, but I had no recollection of saying it at all, and still don't. Reoccurring dreams. When I was a child, preschool age, I used the wrong word for stop and come back. When asked about this, I told my parents a story about it being late at night. I stood in a long line of people on a road that curved with the side of a hill. I was worried about my papers. I heard a gunshot and the people in uniforms checking papers came walking round the line yelling for me. I was in my late 20s, male, and had a female partner. I took her hand so we could run for it down the hill. I remember thinking, I just need to make it to the river because of the dogs, and we would need to go now to have some distance before the men in uniform get too close. We ran. The men in uniform started yelling the words I used as a child for stop and come back. My partner tripped. I stopped for her, but the men were too close. We both turned face down. I remember thinking what a pitiful attempt to hide in the grass. They saw us and were right behind us, but we didn't have another option. I crawled on top of her to protect her as best I could with my back to the men in uniform. I remember hoping they would only beat me, but knew that wasn't going to happen. There were two men chasing us, one closer than the other. They were only 20 steps behind or so, because as soon as she fell and I stopped to protect her, I heard their footsteps slow down. I closed my eyes, listened to the footsteps stop, heard a gunshot. Everything went white, and I woke up as a child again, with a thought, it will be better this time. My parents asked around about the words I used. It turns out they were Czech. I still have a reoccurring dream about the line, running, being chased, her falling, me trying to protect her, and being shot in the back at close range at least once a year. I always wake up feeling the sting of being shot between the spine and the right shoulder blade. Oh Christ, that's a bit dodgy, isn't it? The Good Mum, from a Redditor. When my youngest son was 3, we were driving through a part of town we don't often visit, and he pointed out a house. That's where my first mummy lived, when I used to be a little girl. She wasn't nice to me. I was really very scared of her. I'm glad you're my mummy now. I think the shorter ones are more creepy because it just leaves you with your head spinning as to what could have happened. I'll never let go. BuzzFeed user. My 4-year-old nephew talks about being on the Titanic all the time. He said he was with his wife and that it was really cold. And every time he watches a movie with boats or bodies of water, he gets freaked out and wants it to turn off. He says he misses some lady but refuses to say her name. Head trauma, from BuzzFeed. When my daughter had just turned 3, my husband and I were hanging out with her in our bedroom, which used to be his parents' old room. My daughter looked at my husband and said, "I used to be your mother." His mum died when he was 10. Intrigued, I asked her to tell us something about that. She continued, "I went to work and got hit in the head," and made a gesture to her head. My husband and I both looked at each other in shock. His mother was in a car accident on her way to work when a bus slammed into her car, and she had severe head trauma. No one ever spoke of that, not even next to my daughter. Today, my daughter is 10 and doesn't remember any of this, but if my husband wasn't in the room, I don't think anyone would have believed my story. Extraterrestrial. My friend's little girl said to her family when she was 2, "I came to Earth this time to see what it's like to be a human. And I love having hands. It's so great." This kid is only 5, but she really is weirdly wise and just, I can't explain it. I saw her today, and she seems like she knows much more than most people with regards to sensitivity and perception. What do you guys think? Put your mind through a loop. Have you ever experienced a past life yourself, or do you know someone that recalls a past life? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. It would really help me out, and I hope to see you next time for part 2. But until then, just remember to always be inspired, be positive, and be you. Bye guys. Sleep well.